Back in November of 2024, I ended up reviewing the demo for Metroidvania, a 3D Metroidvania with gravity-changing mechanics and rhythm-based combat. And with how impressive the demo was, I figured now's a great time to return, seeing as the full game is finally here. And after fully completing it, I can easily say it did not disappoint. Alright, now before diving into everything the full game has to offer, first I've got to go over the gravity changing mechanics. Basically, in Metroidvania, you explore a dreamlike virtual world known as the halls. And what you may notice early on is that gravity doesn't behave quite like it should here, as most surfaces in the halls have their own gravitational pull, kind of like in Super Mario Galaxy. Now, even in just the demo, what really stood out to me about this mechanic was just how deeply it's woven into the game's level design. For starters, since you're not limited to a fixed perspective, rooms will often have unusual layouts with things like twisting hallways or high-up entryways that really encourage you to fully utilize the gravity-changing mechanics. And with there being 5 additional areas to explore in the full game, this is enhanced even further with how distinct each area looks. Along with that, you're also incentivized to thoroughly explore each of these areas, as there are plenty of hidden collectibles to find, like permanent health upgrades or lore documents. Altogether, this not only makes the gravity mechanics feel a lot more natural, but it also makes exploring each of the game's areas a lot more fun and engaging. But like any good Metroidvania, some of these areas will be locked behind certain abilities. Starting off with the main abilities from the demo, there's the Gravity Amulet, which lets you create gravitational fields that shift gravity in a set location, as well as the Needle and Thread, which can connect objects, either pulling them together or conducting electricity between them. Now, the one complaint I had with these abilities in the demo was that I wish the range for the Gravity Amulet was a little bit longer, since it was just so much fun to use. So I was pleasantly surprised in the full game when I realized you could place fields further away and that they could reach further. But those weren't the only changes made in the full game. First off, aside from the other 2 main abilities, you can also unlock the Handy Wrench, which summons a hand to rotate objects, and the 2.5 pound weight, which lets you fall faster and break these purple barriers. And in addition to that, there's also a few minor abilities to unlock as well. There's the Revolver, which boosts your damage if you time an attack as it shoots, although it doesn't do any damage on its own. The Tuning Fork, which can help you locate the game's bosses or missing collectibles as long as you have the right upgrade, as well as the Telescope, which is, well, a telescope. And while it isn't an ability, I also wanted to mention the Basketball Shoes, which give you the ability to double jump. Now, at least for the main abilities, you'll primarily be using them to solve various puzzles throughout the halls. Starting off, they're fairly simple, with you just needing to move blocks to open up waterways, but as you progress further, the game keeps introducing new elements to keep the puzzles fresh. Maybe it's a water block that breaks on certain surfaces, batteries that you'll need to make a circuit with to power devices, light beams that you need to reflect with mirrors, the fucking shadow puzzles from Resident Evil, or it could be a combination of things where you need to use multiple abilities together, and that's just naming a few. In addition to that though, there's also a decent bit of variety when it comes to how difficult these puzzles are. Now, truth be told, most of these puzzles aren't too hard to solve, and if you're struggling with any of the required ones, then you can get a hint if you'd like. So if you're just trying to beat the game, it's honestly not that bad. However, if you're trying to 100% it, that's a completely different story. Unlike most of the normal puzzles where it's kinda obvious what you need to do, these harder ones can be a bit more complex, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't get stuck on a few of them. However, since they're entirely optional, if I was really stuck on one of them, I could just leave and come back whenever I wanted, even after beating the game. So if you're the kind of person who enjoys a bit of a challenge, where you really need to understand the game's mechanics and use your abilities in some pretty creative ways, I'd highly recommend giving these puzzles a try, as they're definitely some of the most satisfying and rewarding ones to solve. Now, outside of using your main abilities to solve these puzzles, some of them also double as movement abilities, which makes them feel a lot more impactful. For example, while the Gravity Amulet's gravitational fields can affect objects in the environment, they also affect you. Meanwhile, the Needle and Thread can be used like a grappling hook to swing around if used in the air, and the 2.5 pound weight can be used to gain momentum by falling faster. What's really cool about these abilities though, is how they're designed to be used together in multiple different ways. Basically, since you can equip 2 different abilities at once, you can easily swap between them depending on the situation, and when combined with the air dash and double jump, the combinations open up even more. Along with that, most of these abilities are designed with the gravity changing mechanics in mind, often using falling as a means of traversal. So not only do these abilities make it a lot more interesting to move throughout the halls, but they also feel integral to the gameplay since they have multiple uses and are built around the game's core mechanics. Speaking of the core mechanics, I've yet to talk about the other half of Metroidvania, its music. And just like the gravity, it's a core part of the game's design. Now, while that may not be obvious at first, the music in Metroidvania is deeply intertwined with almost every aspect of the game, like how animation speeds match the timing of the music, or how NPCs have music sheets for dialogue boxes and different instruments for dialogue noises. But where this really stands out is in the game's rhythm-based combat. Now, the first thing you should know about Metro Gravity's combat is that every enemy action is synced to the tempo of the music. However, that doesn't mean that every fight is the same, as depending on the music, fights will have different time signatures. So, for example, in the Nothing Factory, fights have a time signature of 5, while in the Aqueducts they have a time signature of 8, and in the Gambler's Palace, they have a time signature of 12. Aside from just having different time signatures though, areas also have different enemy types, each with their own unique set of attacks and abilities. Some may have attacks with long windups lasting several beats like the Gold-Faced Golem, while others might strike every other beat like the Origami Samurai, or they can attack multiple times on one beat like the Sun Poachers. What I really liked about the combat though is that your actions should also be in sync with music. So rather than frantically mashing buttons, instead you need to feel the beat, using these special indicators to time your parries, dodges, and jumps while attacking whenever you can, which ends up making the fights feel less like simple battles and more like performances. But where this is even more apparent is in the game's boss fights. Now, what's really interesting about the boss fights in Metro Gravity is how they're more like a chart in a rhythm game, as each boss is fully scripted to be in sync with their music. So as long as you live through the entire song, you'll end up beating the boss, regardless of how much damage you do. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't attack the boss. Basically, every time you damage a boss, you'll earn points towards your score. Meanwhile, parrying the boss's attacks will increase your score multiplier, and getting hit will reduce it. So since you already want to be dodging and parrying the boss's attacks to avoid getting hit, you might as well attack whenever there's an opening to build up your score. Not only does this make each boss a lot more engaging to fight, but it also makes it feel like you're part of the performance. The way the music and the boss's attacks pull you into the rhythm makes every dodge, parry, and counterattack feel deliberate, like you're playing along with the song itself, and when everything clicks, it's just so satisfying. Now, along with that, another thing that I really liked about the bosses in Metro Gravity is how you can refight them. So whether you're aiming for the score-related achievements or trying to climb the global leaderboards, you can fight these bosses again whenever you want. And if you're looking for an extra challenge after beating the game, you can grab the Drumsticks of Doom to fight harder versions of each boss. Moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is the story of the game. So if you'd like to avoid any spoilers, feel free to skip to this point in the video. Alright, with that out of the way, here's a quick summary of the game's story. Basically, after filling out a suspicious online survey, our protagonist Stephanie finds herself transported to the halls, along with the previously mentioned bosses known as the Old Ones, and 6 other more friendly NPCs. Now, in order for any of them to leave the halls, they'll first need to remember what it was they filled out in their survey. However, that's easier said than done, since you lose any memories of it once you enter the halls, and if you end up staying too long, you risk going insane like the Old Ones. After defeating a few of them though, and helping them leave, you'll end up meeting the entity responsible for this survey, a spiral-faced man known as Wonder, who really doesn't want us leaving. But after defeating the rest of the Old Ones and confronting Wonder himself, we learn that, whatever he is, he's using our brother's brain and keeping him in a coma. So after an absolutely insane boss fight, we end up defeating Wonder and saving our younger brother. Now, overall, I'd say that I did enjoy the game's story on its own. But what really stood out to me about it was how it rewards you for exploring and gathering all the collectibles. Documents, for example, can help you piece the narrative together a bit more and also give some additional lore on each of the bosses. Gifts, on the other hand, can be used to progress through NPC questlines, minus Coltrane's, which you'll need to complete the bestiary for. Altogether though, I felt like these questlines added a lot to the overall story, and I really liked how you get these Polaroids of everyone meeting in the real world by completing their quests. Finally, while they may not be related to the story, I also wanted to mention all the different costumes you can get. Personally, my favorite would definitely have to be the Goth one, but I still really enjoyed all the other outfits, like the Winter or Pseudo-Regalia ones, and I really liked how some of them also had different weapon skins. All in all, coming back to Metro Gravity after initially covering its demo, I think it's safe to say that the full release more than exceeded my expectations. Not only does it expand on what was already there, but it turns the game into a truly unique experience. And despite how weird its combination of mechanics may seem, when everything comes together, it just works. So whether you're a fan of rhythm-based games, 3D Metroidvanias, or supporting indie devs, then I cannot recommend Metro Gravity enough, especially at just $13. But if for some reason you're still unsure, you can always try out the free demo on Steam. And with that, mateys, is the end of the video. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And until next time, take care, and I'll see you around, mateys.